everybody. Okay. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Welcome to our special Cinco de Mayo episode of the Winning Digital Customers Show. And I thought it would be fun today to talk a little bit about Cinco de Mayo in the context of our usual topic, or how it connects to our usual topic of succeeding as a business in today's digital age. Now, what are the connection between those two things? Well, of course, if you run a Mexican bar, Cinco de Mayo is probably the greatest day of your year. But if that's not the business you happen to be in, I think there are some other interesting things that we can look at. So let's start by asking the question, what the heck is Cinco de Mayo? What is this holiday about anyway? You know, a lot of people think, in fact, I thought for a long time that it was sort of a Mexican 4th of July revolutionary Independence Day type of holiday. But no, that's not really what it is. There's another date that's Mexico's Independence Day. Cinco de Mayo celebrates the successful victory of Mexico over an attempted invasion by France, in fact, led by Napoleon III, not the famous Napoleon from all the statues, but I think it was his, nephew or somebody or other, somebody that succeeded the most famous Napoleon. But in any case, Mexico successfully repelled an invasion by France. And it is that successful repelling of the invader, which is celebrated on Cinco de Mayo. And so I thought it would be interesting to talk a little bit about this idea in the context of business, because after all, if you are running a business of any level of success, you are experiencing a frequent attempt at encroaching upon your territory, shall we say, which is exactly what France was trying to do to Mexico in the 1800s, which is to say you have competitors who are seeking to eat your lunch and take your customers. And so let's talk today a little bit about, Mexico, of course, was successful at stopping the invaders who are trying to take their land. What can you do if you have competitors who are trying to steal your customers and take over your position in the market? And by the way, although in this case we celebrate Mexico's successful overcoming of an attempted encroachment into their territory, these topics that I'm going to talk about competitors are just as effective if you are the invader, if you are the one who's trying to grow and take territory and take market share from your competitors. So whether you are viewing the world from a defensive position, trying to stop competitors from eating into your market share, or from an offensive position, trying to successfully take from your competitors, these principles that I'm talking about are equally applicable. And in fact, most businesses are constantly doing both, right? You're trying to grow, you're trying to get more customers, and you're trying to make sure that the customers you already have stay with you. So I'm going to talk about five key steps, really. And then, by the way, I should have mentioned right away, we are live in Clubhouse. Those of you who are long-term watchers of the show, probably, I think most of you choose your channel. So we have people who watch us on Facebook, who watch us on LinkedIn, and who watch us on YouTube, and because we stream live to all three of those platforms. But we have added a fourth. We are now experimentally using Clubhouse, the newest, coolest, hottest social media platform. And there, what we're doing is we're starting a Clubhouse room. We, just as we are doing right now, we broadcast the show into the Clubhouse room for the first, whatever it will be, 20, 25 minutes. And then we have a follow-up discussion. So you have a couple choices. You can either just, you can stick with what you're doing. That's fine. Or you can listen to the show wherever you are. And then if you want to join us in the Clubhouse room, I think we're going to put up the link or what have you when you go to Clubhouse to find that Clubhouse room. So I'll ask my team to put that up on the screen. And if you want to, you can join us for some discussion after. Or if you prefer, you can just join us in Clubhouse and listen to the show right on Clubhouse, and then join us and then stay for the discussion. The only thing is Clubhouse has no video. So if you like to watch me talk and see the slides and such, that you'd have to do via another platform. The only thing you'll get in Clubhouse is the audio. And by the way, Clubhouse is still in beta. If you need an invite, you need to be invited to join Clubhouse. I do have some invites. So I hesitate to say it on a show like this because I'd hate to get 100 requests and only have 5 invites. But if you need an invite, put it in the messaging and we will try to get you an invite if we still have any. And then hopefully you will pass that on to others. So that is the cool stuff we're doing on StreamYard. Back to our topic. So competitors. So we're going to talk about 5 steps to dealing effectively with your invading competitors as the Mexicans did against the French. So the first thing you want to make sure that you're really clear on is who your competitors are. And, that might seem like a silly thing to say because often it's obvious. Well, Coke's competitor is Pepsi and Citibank's competitor is JP Morgan Chase and Wells Fargo and, and so on and so on. But, and that is one category of competitor, right? Your sort of most direct head-to-head obvious competitor. But I actually would encourage you to think about some other categories of competitors and really make sure you've thought it through. I mean, after all, look at someone like a Hertz rental car. Who's their competitor? Well, you could say Avis is their primary competitor, or Budget, or Dollar, but is Uber also kind of a competitor of a rental car company? If you're traveling on business, you could land somewhere and decide you don't need the traditional model of a rental car because you're going to take an Uber. I think if you think about your business and consider, instead of who is trying to do the same thing that I'm doing in the marketplace, I mean, you do want to think about those people, but beyond those, who are people who are solving the same underlying need that I'm solving? I mean, movie theaters compete with watching videos at home, but they also compete with nightclubs and bars or anything that someone would go, or places like Chuck E. Cheese, right? If you talk about kids going to film. So just do that exercise for yourself. By the way, in my book, Winning Digital Customers, which I encourage everyone to pick up a copy of, there's a whole model in there of 5 different types of competitors to think about. And it goes on for a little while about different exercises and ways to analyze and identify who are all the different types of companies that you potentially should be looking at in that sort of competitive analysis exercise. I'm not going to try to get into all that right now. I could do a whole live cast just on the different types of competitors, but think about who are your different types of competitors and who are the specific companies who are your competitors. That's the first step. If Mexico wasn't even aware of who might be invading them, I probably wouldn't have been successful in repelling them. I mean, I know there's that old joke, that military intelligence is a contradiction in terms, right? But in fact, one of the most important things you have when you're trying to engage in any kind of battle, whether it's a military one or whether it's a business one, is knowledge and intelligence. Who is coming after you? What is their strategy? What are their tactics, et cetera? So let's move on, because the first is just to know who. The next one is, so what are they doing? What is it that your competitor is doing? The Mexicans had some knowledge that the French, they were invading by sea. They had ships. They understood something about what the strategies were that were being employed to attack them. Similarly here, once you understand who your competitors are, you want to be paying attention to what they're doing in the marketplace. And actually, I would suggest that the first thing you need to be thinking about is, who are your competitors going after? What types of customers are they targeting? Because it may be exactly the same as you, but it may not be. They may be going after a slightly younger or slightly older crowd, or a more professional or more, consumer crowd, or I don't know in your case, but just because you think, oh, that they're our competitor, does Citibank go after the exact same customers as Chase? Maybe so, but maybe there are niches that one is focused on, the other isn't focused on. Is one more focused on the Hispanic market? Is one more focused on young families? Is one more focused on small businesses? Is one really going after the subprime mortgage market? Within the realm of what many companies can target, there are many different customer segments, and it may be that your competitor is going after some slightly different types of customers than you are, or with a different emphasis. And then, of course, the second thing is, how are they going after them? And there's really 2 components of how your competitor will be going after your customers. Peter Drucker famously said there's only 2 parts to business: innovation and marketing, right? So think of it that way. And if we think about innovation, we're really talking about, what is the proposition? What is the product? What is the service? What are they doing? What are they offering to customers in exchange for their money? And then, of course, marketing. What is the messaging? How are they reaching customers? It could be that your competitors are using TikTok in a way that you're not using, that's being very successful. Or it could be that they have a story or a slogan or something else that they've brought into the marketplace that's really connecting with consumers, or a spokesperson or a celebrity. So you want to make sure, and some of this may seem obvious, but I have to say I'm often surprised at how many large brands, major brands, of course, they know who their competitors are, but if you said, well, are you tracking them? Do you know what they've done this month? Are you paying attention? If they were to change their ad campaign, or if they were to add an important new feature to their app, would your team know right away? Do you have a mechanism for keeping an eye on that, it's shocking how many companies would say, well, no, not really. I hear about these things. I might get an email from somebody. Hey, I just noticed on on our competitor's app, they're doing this, but there's not a formal method for tracking. And that's pretty dangerous. In going back to our military metaphor, you're always going to have, sentries, right? Going back thousands and thousands of years, the Hamlet starts with the sentries, right? If you've ever seen the play Hamlet or read it in high school or college, the sentries are guarding, right? They're keeping watch just to see who might come in case the country should be attacked. And so similarly, you need sentries at your company. You need to be constantly looking out to see who are these competitors and what is it that they're doing that might be dangerous to us, and who are they going after? And it's important to really understand both of these components, because then the next thing you want to be evaluating is, so how's it working? What is the reaction they're getting? Those that are longtime listeners probably have heard me say many times, the number one thing that a business does to be successful is to influence its customers. If you can influence your customers and prospects successfully and get them to do what you want them to do, you're probably going to have a great business, even if you're screwing up in a wide variety of other ways. And if you do everything else right, but you fail to influence your customers and get them to do what you want them to do, it's going to be pretty hard to stay in business, even if you have a great accounting system or your legal department is amazing, or whatever else you may be doing really, really well. So the important thing here is to be looking to see, as your competitors are doing things, how is the customer responding? Because first of all, it would be foolish to simply slavishly copy everything your competitor does, because you say, oh, they're doing it, so we have to do it, quote unquote, to compete. Now, why is that? Well, because a lot of things don't work. A lot of things are a failure. Most new ideas that people put forth in one form or another are unsuccessful. So don't just say, oh, our competitors added this feature, we better add it. Or our competitors upgraded their product in this way, we better do the same and copy them, because it may be that consumers don't care about that at all. It may be that the smartest competitive move that you could make is to not do that, to not put your investment, to not put your focus on that particular thing, to save that and use it for something else that might be more successful at beating your competitor. On the other hand, maybe your competitor has just come out with an innovation that makes a huge difference for customers, that massively competitively differentiates them in the marketplace, and consumers are starting to move over to your competitor because they have something you don't have. Well, in that case, you better pay attention. You better be thinking about either, how can I get to parity around this capability, whatever it may be that my competitor has, or how can I come up with something even better that solves that same problem? But in any case, I'm jumping ahead. The main point is that step number 3, remember step number 1, who are your competitors? Step number 2, what are they doing? Step number 3, essentially, is how's it working? And most of how's it working can be evaluated based on the reaction of customers. And by the way, you might ask, well, how would I know? How do I know how customers are reacting to our competitors' products? Research, baby. There's all kinds of different techniques for doing customer research to find this stuff out, from mystery shopping your competitors' stores to doing different types of market research studies where you expose sample customers to products and services of your competitors, to doing different types of surveys. There's a wide range. In fact, again, not to keep plugging my own book here, but in my book, Winning Digital Customers, I spend a fair amount of time talking about a wide range of different techniques to do both customer research, and one type of which is competitive analysis. So you absolutely can find out how your customers or how your competitors' customers are reacting to the new things your competitors are doing. And by the way, this is a fantastic laboratory for you. Imagine if I said to you that there's a whole team of people that are working all day, every day to figure out how to better solve your customers' needs, to innovate the products and services, to come up with better messaging. There's a whole team of these people, and I've got working on this all day, every day long. And then I said, actually, it's better than that. There's a whole bunch of teams. I've got a whole bunch of teams doing this, constantly testing different things to see what works in the marketplace. And by the way, the cost to you for all these teams constantly testing things to see what's going to work for your customer is zero. You don't have to pay one nickel for it. All you have to do is sit back and see what are all your competitors doing in the marketplace and cherry pick which of those things are successful. But the only way you're going to be able to do that is if you're doing your own research to, at least, you don't have to pay to come up with the ideas. You don't have to pay to create them and bring them to market. All you have to spend a little money on is the testing to determine, as these new things have come out, whether they work or not. So you can figure out which of these ideas you want to figure out how to either copycat, come to parity with, or in other way be inspired or influenced by in your decision making. So is actually a tremendous resource. Competitors in some ways are the best thing you could possibly have in business if you use their efforts to your advantage. And so understanding how people are reacting is key to that. And so once you understand how people are reacting, there's really two things you can do to respond. And probably you're going to want to do a little bit of both. One is outposition. What is outposition? Outposition is all about messaging. Outposition is when your competitor comes out and says, we have just become the biggest, provider of product XYZ to the marketplace. We're the market leader. Maybe you want to come out and say, yeah, do you want the biggest company that's not going to give you any personal attention? We are smaller. This is, if you remember, Avis did this brilliantly many years ago, right? They came out, they were the second largest car rental company at the time, and they came out with perhaps one of the most famous slogans in advertising. We're number two, we try harder, right? That's a classic example of outpositioning. Instead of letting their competitors say, well, you should come to us because we're number one, they said, hey, you should come to us because we're number two. So the reason outpositioning can be so effective, particularly if you find yourself in a situation where your competitor has brought something very successful to market, is that you may not be able to achieve feature parity, offer parity with them all that quickly, because that is the advantage they have. I mentioned earlier how it's great that you've got all these competitors who are constantly testing things so that you can figure out what works. The only downside to that is then once you figure it out, or once you see that they've figured it out, they're ahead of you, right? And you've got to catch up. And depending on what it is, that may take you some time. You may need to do R&D. You may need to figure out, you may need to change your product, change your manufacturing process, hire new people, create a new software system to track. Who knows what it is, right? It all depends on what it is your competitor's doing. But outpositioning is something you can often do much, much faster. Now, it doesn't work for everything, but if I was a New York City taxi company and I was trying to outposition Uber that has a better customer experience in 10 different ways, I'd probably play on the heritage and the authenticity of the New York City taxi. Are you a real New Yorker? Real New Yorkers take yellow cabs. Real New Yorkers don't call an Uber. That's sure, it might be easier, right? It might even be cheaper, but that's not a real New York experience. That's another example of outpositioning. Now, will it work? It might not. I consider myself a real New Yorker. I've lived in this area since 1986, and I would use an Uber if it was more convenient. But it's at least worth a shot, and might work on some people. So outpositioning is one often more rapid strategy to dealing with a competitive threat that's actually working in the marketplace. The good news is, if it's not working, and that's why the prior one we talked about, reaction, is so important, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to do anything. Your competitor spent energy and money and is unsuccessful, and you can just happily keep doing what you're doing. But when your competitor does something successful, one thing you might want to consider doing is outpositioning. But outpositioning is only so powerful because today people believe what you do more than what you say. And you're probably not going, I don't know that yellow cabs are going to destroy Uber in New York City by convincing everybody that they are more authentic, right? They may get a few more cab fares here and there, but it's not enough. It's not enough. So the more important thing to do, but also sometimes the more time consuming, is to out innovate. You need to say, okay, my competitor has taken a step forward. What can I do to at least match them and potentially even go beyond them? And clearly, one of the areas in which companies in almost every industry, I'll dare say every industry, is thinking about right now is digital, because it's the area which has been the most changing. Digital transformation was a major wave before COVID, and COVID has only accelerated it more, which means the companies are finding more and more ways to leverage digital technology to provide a better customer experience, a more personal customer experience, a more convenient customer experience, and just plain old more value. Look at what Netflix gives you for, I forget what it costs now. Is it $20 a month? Something like that for Netflix. Look at that. I subscribe to Netflix. I don't even know what it costs because it's so valuable that if someone said, oh, actually they're charging you $24.95 now, I'd be like, okay. If they said, well, actually they've just raised it to $32.75, I'd be like, well, okay, because it's so valuable. that, I mean, there's always a point where you'd say that's too much, but Netflix has done such a great job of innovating, not just how they deliver, but how they use technology to make a much more successful value proposition compared to the old days of going to the video store. What I would spend in a weekend to rent a few videos at Blockbuster is now what I spend on a monthly subscription to Netflix, where I have an enormous volume of content. So not to do a plug for Netflix, but point being, when you can out innovate and provide something that's more value for less money with greater convenience, that is the ultimate way. And this is why competitive data is so valuable, because, you can innovate. You can come up with a new idea that doesn't make a difference in the marketplace, as we said before. In fact, that's true of many new ideas. How often do you go, remember the old Sharper Image, or you look through a catalog on a flight? My daughter showed me a product yesterday. It's a scrub brush. It's for the shower. It's a scrub brush that's also a Bluetooth, a Bluetooth speaker, right? So you can have a scrub brush if you want to scrub yourself in the shower, and you can connect it to your iPhone and play music through it. So is this like a genius innovation that everybody needs? Or is this just, not really solving a problem? I don't know how many of you were sitting around before going, man, I have a Bluetooth speaker and I have a scrub brush, but first of all, how many people even use a scrub brush in the shower? I don't know. Do you? I don't. Well, okay. Maybe I'm not clean enough though. I don't know. In any case, but how many people were saying, I do use a scrub brush in the shower and I have a Bluetooth speaker, but I really wish they were combined together, and I could be mistaken. Maybe there's a million people out there who want that. But the point is that coming up with a new idea doesn't necessarily make you more successful in business. And the opportunity here is to, of course, use competitive insight to figure out where the real need and desire is. And then do other customer research, by the way. And that's going to relate to my last point, to really figure out what's something that's going to matter and that's going to succeed in overcoming whatever that competitive angle is. And the last thing I want to say, though, is we've been talking about competitors because competitors are a threat to business, and we want to come up with a perhaps slightly tenuous connection to Cinco de Mayo. And since today is Cinco de Mayo, I should have brought my margarita with me. That's in the other room. I was drinking it earlier. No. Just a tad early for me. Anyway, point is, I do want to remind you, though, don't focus too much on your competitors. This can also be a trap. And, I guess one classic example of it would be, the whole idea of military strategies where a country is getting attacked from multiple directions. You can focus too much on one competitor and not focus enough, on another area, perhaps get beaten there. But my main point is focusing on competitors is important because, after all, they could dramatically reduce your success by stealing your customers with a better value proposition. And furthermore, they're a great source of potential new ideas. However, I also think there's a trap that some companies fall into where all their innovation is focused on their competitors. They're just constantly asking themselves, what are our competitors doing and how can we keep up? And while that is a good question to ask, if that's the only question you're asking to drive your innovation, you may really miss the boat. I don't think that's what Apple does. I don't think that's what Uber does. I don't think that's what Facebook does. It's first and foremost asking a different question. The main focus should be, where are our customers still experiencing pain or inconvenience that we could eliminate? Or how can we add things to our product that would make our customers' lives better and delight them even more? Forgetting what our competitors are doing. Focus first and foremost on your customer, not your competitor. And if you're doing a fantastic job of continuously innovating and making a better value proposition for your customer, it becomes less and less and less important what your competitors are doing anyway. And if you're focused exclusively on your competitor, the risk you run is you're always in the Me Too business. You're always in the catch-up business, and you never have that opportunity to jump to the lead and break through with something that isn't what your competitors are focused on. So I just wanted to end with this thought because while I don't want to take away from the message, which is, and it's funny because I find that there's many companies that don't focus enough on their competitors. In fact, most. And yet I find that there's many companies that focus too much on their competitors. In fact, most. And you might say, well, Howard, maybe you have been drinking that margarita because that doesn't make any sense. Well, they're not focusing enough on their competitors in the sense that they don't have, and this may be true of your company, really an organized program in place to know who are all the competitors we're tracking, what are we tracking about them, like their marketing, their product changes, things like that. And how are we reporting that and socializing, and how are we making sure that we really understand what's going on in the competitive marketplace? I think many, many, many companies, the vast majority, are not doing a good job of this. But at the same time, an equally large majority of companies have, everybody, of course, has an awareness of who their competitors are, what their competitor does if they come out with a major new advertising campaign or a major new product. And so there's a tendency to be very focused on the competitor in terms of what you're doing and how you're driving your offerings forward, your innovation forward. And so the result is you're focusing too much because you give too much of your energy to competitors, but you don't even actually have, you're still only looking at a small percentage of the knowable information about your competitors. And then on top of that, focusing too much on, oh, we need to beat them in this area, we need to beat them in their area, maybe robbing your teams of where the more valuable focus is around the customer and finding innovations that have nothing to do with what your competitors are doing. Of course, there's nothing to say that you can't do both of these things. And that really is what I would recommend. Your focus should both be on your competitors and on your customer. But I would say, if I were to use an analogy, your customer should be in the front of you and your competitor should be in your peripheral vision. Just make sure that that peripheral vision is there. And hopefully the steps, the structure that I've put in place over the last few minutes around how to think about competitors might be useful for you and your teams in terms of that peripheral component of keeping an eye on your competitors. So that's it for today. I want to remind everybody that we will be continuing this conversation in Clubhouse. So feel free to join us there, and happy to answer any questions or hear your thoughts, etc. If you're not a Clubhouse person, well, if you need a Clubhouse invite, let us know and we'll try to send you one. And if you're just Clubhouse, I don't need another social media platform, give me a break. I like LinkedIn, or I like Facebook or YouTube. That's totally fine. If you have any questions, comments, etc., feel free to put them there. Oh, one last thing I want to tell you for anyone who's still with me. The second season of my podcast, also called Winning Digital Customers, is launching tomorrow. And I want to encourage you to check that out. You can find it wherever podcasts are found. And it is totally different content by and large from what we cover on the live casts. Most of my podcast episodes are me interviewing digital leaders, people who run digital or other key executives from large brands, people who are major thought leaders like New York Times bestselling authors in this space, things like that. So a lot of great additional material there. If you're not a follower of the podcast, I encourage you to do that. And it should be easy for you to remember because it has the same name as the live cast, Winning Digital Customers. All right, that's it for today. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Enjoy, drink up if that's your thing. And I look forward to seeing you next time.